Recognized Uncle Walker D01. Recognized Roy Sovich D15.
Today in the cave, we have the mind behind the fantastic Earth-27 project, Roy Westerman. Earth-27 is a fan fiction project done by Roy and artist Phil Cho that reimagines the entire DC universe in kind of a way that parallels what Greg and Brandon did for their vision of Young Justice. Roy's inspiration for creating the Earth-27 project, though, is a story that hits close to home for me, so I'm going to let him share that story himself. Roy, it's an honor to welcome you to the cave.
Thanks for having me, Rich.
Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that our discussion episodes draw on anything and everything related to Young Justice, including both seasons of the TV series, that is, both seasons so far, we get to say. I love it. The comics and the video game. If you have not seen, read, or played all of the material and are spoiler wary, consider this your warning. And with all that out of the way, let's dive in. Before we get into the very cool Earth-27 project itself, Roy, can you share that story I nodded to at the beginning, where the inspiration came from?
Yeah. A year and a half ago, me and my wife were expecting the birth of our son within, just a couple weeks. It was about 10 days before his due date, and my wife went in for a routine appointment to the doctor. I got the call, and they asked me to come see her. And I was just expecting that that they decided to induce her. I was expecting that, I was going to be coming out of that hospital with a baby boy. When we got there, they told me that they couldn't find a heartbeat, and I heard my wife crying off in a, distant room. And then when I went and saw her, and it was just devastating news. It was nothing that we had expected. And
yeah, I'm so sorry, man.
Anyway, so after she actually had the stillbirth, and the hospital said, please take as much time with him as you need. My wife still, she still had to go through labor and everything, and it was a toll on her body, so she still had to stay there for a number of days. And so we had our son with us about a day and a half. And in that time, I tried to do the things with him that I would if he were alive.
Yeah, no, I understand. I have a son as well, and a daughter, and
yeah,
I get it.
One of those things, was watching cartoons with him and his older sisters. I have two girls, and it was important that they had some time with him too. One was too young, but
how old are your daughters?
They are 10 and 4. So at that time they were about 2 and 8. She was 8 at the time. My oldest daughter, I let her pick out a cartoon, and the only thing that was on in the hospital was the only cartoon was Teen Titans Go, of all things. And I didn't really care for that cartoon. I really even didn't like her watching it at that point. But I hadn't really given it a try. And
yeah, I understand.
Because I was just the comic book nerd in me. I really liked that Teen Titans Go, that first one. Or not Teen Titans Go, but the first Teen Titans cartoon. I thought was, this was a pale imitation of it. But when I realized that Teen Titans Go wasn't for me, and it was for the kids, and it was introducing even though my daughter had already watched the Teen Titans cartoon, the Teen Titans Go was something that it appealed to her more at her age, and she really liked it. And so anyway, we're watching that, and I just remember thinking, I am not going to have a chance to share comic books and superheroes with my son.
Yeah.
I had already been working with Phil on a different creative project at that time, and I took a couple weeks off from working with Phil to deal with this. I didn't tell Phil what was going on. I didn't really talk to anybody outside of my close friends and family. It was just I didn't know how to process it. And
yeah, I can't imagine
going through the therapy and the counseling that I went through and the support groups. A couple things stuck out at me. They talked about just doing things that make you feel normal. And if you're a creative person, they said be creative. And then somebody else talked about retail therapy. They're like, just if there's something that you can buy or spend money on that makes you feel better, it's okay to do that to help you. And
Yeah.
I remember then me and Phil, we shared this passion with Batman. So
Right.
when I decided, I wanted to get back into commissioning some art from Phil, I decided I was going to do Batman villains. I mean, I chose villains probably because I was in a dark place. And
Sure. Yeah.
as we did these villains, we did probably about 15, 16 or so. And Phil was like, these are really good. I really like the designs you're coming up with for, this. And his artwork was just really great. And after a while, he's like, can I just share these on my website and on his DeviantArt page? And so then he started releasing them. And the reaction for them was really good. We did two pictures of every villain. We did a picture of them in their costume and a picture of them locked up in Arkham. And we did some villains that weren't traditionally in the comics. Like we did the Arkham Origins version of Copperhead.
Uh-huh.
She's a woman, as opposed to the silly guy in the snake suit. And
it's funny. I was just watching Justice League Unlimited with my daughter yesterday. She wanted to watch it, and it was a Copperhead episode. So
yeah, and we did a couple other interesting things like that weren't exactly canon. Like we did the Arkham Origins Bane, I think, body, but we gave him the traditional mask that has like no mouth on it, no cutout mouth, and did a couple other things like that. And people were starting like, well, you're making a mistake. This is, you've got Copperhead in with comic book villains, and
right.
And I just started being like, no, this is not a direct interpretation of any one mythology.
Right, this is just the things you find the most interesting, all kind of brought together. Yeah, makes sense to me.
This was like my ideal version of these characters. And after that,
Right.
There were some other things, like for simplicity's sake, the locked up pictures we did of the villains, we put them in all just orange jumpsuits, and they all just had Arkham, logo on their chest, on their jumpsuit. And a lot of people were like, oh, but Bane's not insane. He should be in Blackgate, and Penguin's not insane, or, things like, why aren't some of these people in Bell Rev instead of, anyway, just all these things.
Right.
And I said, in the comics, Blackgate Prison has been destroyed before. Just pretend it is in this world too. And just that pretend it is in this world too started this ball rolling. And
right.
After that, I just started, this whole concept for Earth-27 came about and started to come about, and took probably about 6 months of releasing these villains before we really got into the meat of Earth-27, about the time that I released Batman and started doing the Bat Family and the supporting characters like Commissioner Gordon, and
right.
we started doing some Justice League people, and before we knew it, we were just tackling the entire DC universe.
Well, the reason why I got a hold of you was because one of our, mutual fans apparently had pointed me in the direction of Earth-27, which I hadn't heard of yet. And when I went to go take a look at what like Roy's artwork and that kind of stuff, I was like, I don't know what this is, but this is awesome. I need to talk to somebody about this. So I'm really glad you were kind enough to come on the show. But bringing it back to Young Justice, and we're going to tie this Young Justice bit into Earth-27 as well here in a sec. But when did you first see the show? I didn't hear you mention the show in the inspiration behind doing this series. Did you binge it on Netflix when it came on? Did you pick it up on DVDs? Kind of what was your history with the show?
Okay, Young Justice. Let's see. I started. I was working nights, and I'd watch a lot of YouTube at work.
Do you mind if I ask you what you do for a living?
That's fine. I'm a corrections officer, so I work at a prison. So when you work at nights, it's pretty much you're just there in case something happens. So you're just killing time a lot of the time.
Yeah, I hear
and
you. Yeah.
I'd watch these YouTube clips of, about like superhero origins like that, trying to catch up on my comic book history. And this was before I started Earth-27. And I'd see a lot of clips from Young Justice, but I didn't know that thing existed at the time. So I just see all these clips and I'd be like, I don't recognize this artwork or this animation from any cartoon.
Oh, you didn't know that the show was out? Was this while it was being released and you were catching it on YouTube?
Yes, this was like in the first half of season 1. I think the first half of season 1 had come out at that point, or like the first 18 episodes had come out. And anyway, I did a little research, found out what this show was, and I think I just on a whim, I couldn't find like whole episodes online at the time anywhere. So I just ended up buying the volumes 1, 2, and 3 on DVD, which was the first 12 episodes, I think.
Interesting, yeah.
And next week when they showed up in the mail, I got home from work and I just put them on and I binge watched like the first 2 discs, the first 8 episodes in a single sitting. And then I fell in love with it at that point. And then then I went and got some sleep. And then when I woke up, I just watched the last 4 episodes. And then I set my DVR to record like the other episode missing, caught up to it, and then by the time that it started, because there's a big gap between episodes 18 and 19 of season 1, I think, and it was like a 5 month.
There had already been a 6-month hiatus, and I think that was their like follow-up 3-month hiatus or something ridiculous.
And so I caught up, and then I watched the last few episodes of season 1, just watching week to week. And then they went into season 2, and I remember I loved the show. I was following it. Anytime I would catch up, I'd watch the DVDs again, and I must have watched season 1 probably 8 times while it was being aired, while season 2 was still going.
No, I hear you. So what was your history with, I mean, you've talked about like you've had this love of DC Comics and you were already working with Roy on some things for like Batman, and you clearly have some history with DC, but I mean, did you grow up reading comics? Was this something that was like something that came a little later in life? Like what's your history with DC? Is DC your comic company of choice, or are you like me and you just love all comics?
I love all comics, but when I was younger, it was Marvel. I was a Marvel kid. I mean, like, I knew of Batman and Superman, and I loved those guys. But I didn't really know of the other DC characters that much outside of Batman and Superman. And I didn't really get a lot of comics growing up. My dad or my brother would occasionally buy a comic because they're like, oh, that'd be something nice to give to Roy, And they'd come home and just hand me a comic book. And
yeah. When I was sick, my mom would go and back in the day, when I was a kid, there wasn't really much in the way of comic stores. So she would grab the stuff off the shelf at the grocery store, whatever random comic numbers were there, and bring me a stack of comics when I was sick. And she inadvertently would buy me the same issue like 3 times, not realizing because the stores don't restock that much. So like I'd be sick like 3 months later and I'd get the same issue of Spider-Man or whatever.
Yeah, same way. It was just occasionally when I was sick or and it was just the stuff that was at the grocery store, nothing from the comic books. And yeah, like, and I would never get like, I could never follow the ongoing stories. It was just I would get an issue, maybe 2 issues, and I'd be able to enjoy that. But story arcs tend to be like 3 issues is a small one.
Right.
Yeah.
Or they'd have like a crossover or something, and you'd just be like, I can't find that.
And then I would get, I tend to get X-Men a lot and Punisher. My brother was really into Punisher, and he was throwing Punisher at me. So I was more of a Marvel kid growing up, and like the information I had from the comic books about the characters was just what was just in popular culture, what my friends would tell me from word of mouth, and what I could read off of the back of like the X-Men collectible cards that were around in the 90s. I mean, I collected that thing that was a passion, those cards. And it was mostly because of the information. Like, this is for Wikipedia or, things like that. So, I mean, I was just craving this information.
Right.
And
right.
Then I watched the Batman and the Superman cartoons when they came out, and I watched Justice League and like that. And I liked those. And those when Justice League came out, that's when I started to be like, oh, this DC is actually kind of interesting outside of Batman and Superman.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we had one of the people who helped inspire or drive the show, our friend Darcy Ross. She had, Young Justice was her first like introduction to the DC universe, and she's now going back and watching Justice League and that kind of thing. But I think she was kind of in the same boat as you, where she knew about Superman and Batman, but like didn't. Her quote was, I didn't know that DC had this much to offer me.
Yeah, I listened to that episode, and I remember her saying that, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like that's kind of what you're saying, right? Like you just weren't, you didn't know that there was something
I wasn't
bigger.
exposed to it, and I don't think really all my friends that were telling me DC's lame and stuff like that, I don't think they really even gave it a shot either. It was just X-Men was popular at that time, and that's what the kids my age were going for, and now
I know in particular you are a particular fan of not just Batman, but a very specific Robin.
Indeed, Tim Drake. I am a big fan of Tim Drake, and
interesting. I love hearing this. I of course am a giant fan of Dick Grayson, but I want to hear your love for Tim, because I've had some younger readers, younger than us anyway, readers say that they are not Tim fans, but I think the modern Tim is a little different than the Tim that you and I grew up with. So, like, can you talk a little bit about Tim?
Sure. So when I finally got into DC Comics and started collecting the graphic novels and stuff, I went back and started looking at I got into the Titans. And Tim was the Robin in that one. And I just got so interested in his character, I went back and just got any graphic novel that really had Tim in it. And I even bought some extra issues that weren't in graphic novels just because I wanted to follow the story of Tim. Like, I really liked the idea of that there was this kid who, he didn't just fall into Batman's lap. He didn't just happen upon Batman. He studied Batman. He figured out Batman's secret, and he was like, Batman needs me. This was a time when he realized after the death of Jason Todd, like, he needed a Robin. Yeah.
Right. He needs a Robin to ground him, right?
Tim thought, hey, I can be that guy. And at first, Tim was not like Dick or Jason. He wasn't an orphan at first. And so his choice to take this path was a very conscious one, and I really like that about his character. And then
actually, that's a really good observation. I like the use of that word, that he did it with intention, consciousness, and intention.
And he's a mental Robin. He's very smart. Even Batman says, he's smarter than me. He one day he's going to be a better detective than I am. And Batman's the world's greatest detective. So, Tim didn't have the acrobatics or the street skills that Jason did. So he had to use strategy, and he had to use his head. And eventually, like, he decided, I need to be better than this. And so he learned how to fight with a staff, and then he became like a world-class staff fighter. But I really liked him. He just appealed to me because of the intellect and the conscious effort, the intent, and I mean, I could go on and on about Tim, like his relationship with Stephanie Brown and all that. And
I love it. I'm interested in, I want to get back to Tim in a minute. I'm definitely going to come back to Tim and chat about Tim as in relation to Young Justice. But let's move into the Earth-27, right? It's a fan fiction project, right, that reimagines, as you kind of nodded to, the DC universe based on your favorite takes on the various myths of the DC universe, from the video games and the comics and the animated series, whatever happens to strike your fancy as, this is one of the, this is my favorite, or this is one of the best interpretations of X character. And I feel like one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show was because I feel like that's a little bit like what Greg Weisman and Brandon Vietti did, right? Greg Weisman, it means they're clearly passionate about the material, but Greg would look at something like, say, the relationship between Dick and Bruce and say, I don't understand why this needs to be so confrontational. This handoff from Robin to Nightwing. Like he looked at the bigger picture of why was Bruce doing this in the first place with Dick, and then sticking to that through line, which is to help Dick, find the people, the people who killed his parents, right? And stop them so that he didn't carry this with him his whole life, right? And put that in, but he did it with every character, right? We don't know what their take is necessarily on, say, Wonder Woman, because we haven't gotten much of a Wonder Woman focus. But, they did make a choice to say not put Donna Troy, the Donna Troy Wonder Girl, into the show, and to put in, the alternate Wonder Girl that's kind of more current in the comics. So I don't know if that was because they like that one better for some reason. I don't think that's probably the case, but they may have done storyline reasons for that. So you are doing the same thing, and it's a pet project. Like currently you have a GoFundMe page for it. Is that correct?
Yes.
But other than that, like this isn't something that you're started off getting paid for. This is stuff that you were literally hiring Phil to do for you. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. We started off, and for about a year, I paid for it all by myself. And then it just, Phil was actually giving me a very good discount because I was a
regular
recurring customer, and we were just friends. But at some point, he's like, for as much detail and everything I'm putting into this, I need to charge a little bit more. And at that point, I was even looking at I might have to just cut back on this because maybe I'm spending a little too much on this as it is. And if he's jumping up his price, that might be the end of it. And when I talked to my fans a little bit about it, that still sounds so weird to me to say that I have fans.
No, I hear you. It's weird for me too. I tend to avoid the word just because.
Yeah. But as I came to the Earth-27 community about it, and
there you go,
told them that somebody suggested that I do a GoFundMe page, and actually even before that, I got a lot of people who had said, "Hey, do you need help with this? I would love to help you." And I had always turned them down before, but then when this came up, I was like, "Okay, I'll try this GoFundMe page." And at first, nothing really happened with it, and then I said that me and Phil were going to... I got enough to keep going, and then I was like, me and Phil got to take a summer break. Phil was planning on leaving this last summer to go out of the country for a bit, and I was going to have a bunch of family stuff. So I said, we're gonna have to take a summer break, so if you want to have a character done before we leave for the summer, I have to have it in by X day or whatever. And just within a matter of a week, I had 28 donations that, of people keep this going, don't take a summer break. And we actually ended up, our summer break went from 3 months to really it was just 3 weeks that we actually were stopped releasing for 3 weeks. And just all these fans were like, "Here, take our money. We want this character. I need to see this character." And I think a lot of them were afraid that we weren't actually going to come back. But we did.
Yeah,
so now we're in quote season 2, and we've been almost releasing a character every weekday. We started off season 2 with villains. Somebody gave me a big donation, and we got 2 solid weeks of just like the big villains of the, Dark Side and Sinestro, Gorilla Grodd, just the big Justice League type villains. Vandal Savage.
Yeah.
What was the question? I got off on a tangent.
No, that's perfect. That's exactly it. I was talking about kind of how the GoFundMe part came from, and this is a fan project. This is a project that you're doing because you love it and you love the material,
Yes.
and were inspired by all of the different takes, the mythologies of these characters. So, and I want our listeners to be able to see that you don't have to be, that you can take your passion, particularly in this day and age, you can take your passion, hook it up with somebody else. Like you do the writing and creative kind of thought process part, and Phil does the art, and you do a team thing together, and then you can put it out there and you can see what people think of it. Right. And you have to take the positive criticism with hopefully the constructive, supportive, encouraging criticism, and you have to kind of ignore the negative just because people want to be negative criticism. Like you took the idea that someone had said, "Hey, why are they all wearing Arkham jumpsuits?" And you're like, "Yeah, that makes sense. We did it because of kind of convenience." But really, what does that mean? Like, let's take a look at that and let's see what that means. Okay, well, what would happen if Blackgate or Bell Rev or both had, been destroyed in the comics? That seems pretty likely, and Arkham is the only place that's relatively equipped enough, if you ignore the fact that Joker, escapes every 2 weeks, relatively equipped enough to hold these people. So now we're looking at your universe, this Earth-27, from a very specific snapshot in time. It's not like everybody is always held in Arkham, but say for this 6 months or this 12 months in season 1 of Earth-27, everyone is in Arkham because of something that happened beforehand, right? So that gives you a richer history, and you've taken that feedback and you've expanded it out into something that made your universe better, right? More interesting, or have a little more depth in some way, right? So you already talked about how you took the Copperhead from the video game. That's a female, like Wan Ti snake-like assassin. Can you talk about it? Like give our listeners kind of an idea of some of the other things that you've pulled out? I know that your Superman and Lex Luthor have a classic kind of relationship that doesn't get hinted at very much. Your Batman has some different things. The Supergirl and Power Girl thing I find really interesting. Can you dive into some of those examples?
Yeah. Let me hurry and tackle the ones that you alluded to. So the Batman and Lex Luthor, I gave them a sort of Smallville.
You mean the
TV show Smallville.
The Superman and Lex Luthor? You said Batman.
Oh, did I say Sorry. Yes. Yeah, Superman and Lex Luthor. I gave them the Smallville sort of backstory where, Lex Luthor, if you watch Smallville, the TV show that was on the WB a while back, or the CW now, they really made Superman's arrival on Earth a catalyst for a lot of the events. Like you had the meteor freaks, and even like Lana Lang's parents were killed by the meteor storm.
Right.
That showed up when Clark came, and Lex lost his hair. He happened to be in Smallville with his dad on a business trip, and got too close to where a meteor hit, lost his hair.
And that's actually an old school, like super old school classic Lex thing, where he had red hair and then he lost it all in an accident, and then like blamed Superman for it or whatever. Some people may not be aware of that, like, whatever, 40s, 50s origin of Lex.
Yeah, most people know Lex as like a businessman, but he was like a mad scientist type guy first.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Too funny.
Yeah, and he had the bright red hair, and then he got in a lab accident and lost it. Blamed Superman for it. Anyway, so I gave them that story. The reason for that is because I really like Smallville. I really like the first 3 seasons of Smallville. And so I gave them that story. My Earth-27 Superman's a bit different as well. Like, he's not as powerful as he is in a lot of comics.
Okay.
I tried to make him a little bit more relatable, like
Kind of like the animated series where he can be taken down by things like electricity and, that kind of thing actually hurts him.
kind of along those lines. Like, he still has to breathe, so like he can hold his breath for a long time and go in space for a little bit, but he's got to have like a space suit or something. Like in the animated series, he usually had a space suit if he was up in space doing stuff for a while. So he's still got to breathe.
Yeah.
Actually, I think that's the case in Young Justice too, because they say like even Kryptonians
Have to breathe, right?
have to breathe.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
Exactly. So I mean, my Superman isn't that as powerful. Going into someone who's connected to Superman, we have Supergirl, and in Earth-27, early on, this is one thing that really separated Earth-27 from a lot of other stuff. Is I said, you know what? A lot of Earth-27 is, in a way, it's like me trying to fix all the unnecessary retcons or the or just the silliness of comics sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I thought one reason for that, or one, like, I'm a big fan of time travel and parallel Earths in stories where it helps the story. But I said, you know what, for Earth-27, no time travel, no parallel Earths.
Okay, interesting. I'm liking where you're going with this.
And so people were like, well, I said I was going to do that. People were like, well, how are you going to do Power Girl? And I'm like,
Oh God,
I really like
Girl is
Power
such
Girl.
a mess.
So I said, I like the concept of Power Girl. I'm going to do something different with it. And everybody was kind of like, they kept asking me, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? It took a while to actually get Power Girl out.
So can I interrupt you for one quick
yeah.
second?
Please
Because
do.
a lot of our listeners have only been exposed to the DC Comics universe through Young Justice, and neither Supergirl nor Power Girl are in the series. And so,
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Explain. So I feel like we need to explain a little bit about the wackiness behind
You
Supergirl
bet.
and Power Girl. So Supergirl is the cousin of Superman, Kara Zor-El, who people may know now that there's a Supergirl TV show that's fairly popular. But Power Girl, I've talked in some of our episodes about the parallel Earth situation. And Power Girl was also the cousin back in the day of Superman, but she was the cousin of Superman from Earth 2.
Or is that Krypton 2?
Or Krypton 2. Yeah, you're right. That's fair. So when they did Crisis on Infinite Earths, a few characters died on Crisis on Infinite Earths that merged the multiverse of DC Comics into one world. But one of those famously was the original Kara Zor-El had died. But Power Girl somehow existed. And so Power Girl, I think Power Girl's shifting origins and who the heck she is rivals. I mean, I think her varied history is only outdone by the ridiculous wackiness of the Hawks. Hawkman and Hawkwoman's origins have been so mangled and muddled over the decades but Power Girl is pretty much right up there. So I don't even know what the current take on Power Girl is in the new Rebirth. I don't even know if she even exists. But that's kind of the history. So when you're talking about Supergirl and Power Girl being on the same planet and you're not going to do multiple Earths or time travel, that makes perfect sense. People are asking you like, okay, well, is Power Girl just not going to be there?
Mm-hmm.
Or what are you going to do? So take it from there. I want to hear what you ended up doing because I actually don't know the end of this story.
Okay, so what I did is I said, okay, they're both Kara Zor-El. So they're both just going to be Kara Zor-El. So what I did is I had Kara, however you say it.
Oh, yeah, that's okay. I'm saying it the way they say it in the show, which is, I think, how I used to say it, Kara.
And so I have her, she's discovered by Clark well after Clark's grown up. She's still a teenager because of, the hankiness of whether it's the Phantom Zone in the show or just wonky space travel mechanics, or in Earth-27, she crash landed off. She got delayed off course, her escape pod, her shuttle, and she ended up landing in the ocean. And her pod, she landed at the same time as Clark, just off course a bit, and landed in the ocean. And her pod just sensed the danger around her and everything, and just automated like a suspended animation on her. And then
I like that. I really like that take. It's a little bit echoey of the what was it? Superman, Batman, Apocalypse. She didn't land in the ocean, but she did land. Well, actually, she might have. She landed somewhere near, but it was near Gotham, I think. And Bruce went out and investigated, and that's where she ended up coming from. And I like that idea that she landed at the same time, and just didn't get woken up because of stresses and strains in the environment. I like that.
And and then I have Clark finds her. His parents give him like the key to his own little ship when he's older. It's actually at his father's funeral. His mother gives it to him. And
wait, I'm sorry. Did you say his father's funeral?
Yes, I said his father's funeral. Yeah, Jonathan Kent passes away in Earth-27.
Did you kill Jonathan?
I did. But I really...
God dang it.
I tied it into...
I don't like it when Jonathan dies.
I didn't kill him in a tornado. I just gave him a heart attack.
Well, he had a heart attack in the 70s, and then in the new remakes, he's dead. I don't know. I'm a big fan of Jonathan Kent. I love those father figures.
I am too, and...
He's really one of those few examples of like someone who I perceive as being a good dad.
Exactly.
And we get a lot of abusive parenting and that kind of stuff in superhero stories. So I think that's why I have a soft spot in my head. But that's okay. I won't hold it against you.
I'll hurry and say this much because I agree with you. I love Jonathan Kent, and actually, like a problem I have with the movie Man of Steel is I felt it took the father figure role away from Jonathan Kent, or the inspirational father figure, and gave it more to Jor-El. And
yeah,
I feel
which removes his human connection.
I boil it down to Jor-El should be where Clark gets the super aspect of Superman. Jonathan Kent is where he gets the man from.
Nice. I really like that. Idea.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
And Jonathan Kent should be Clark's moral compass. And in Earth-27, I say that Jonathan Kent really wanted Clark to use his ability. If he was going to use his abilities, use them for good. But he was also restrained a bit by Martha wanting his wife, Martha Kent, didn't want Clark to expose himself, didn't want him to show his powers to the world for fear of what they would do to him. So when Jonathan died, Martha finally said, okay, you know what, you're hurting. You need to remember your father. You need to honor him in some way. Do what he wanted to do, but, gave him the key to his ship and said, go figure out who you are and what you can do.
Yeah.
And then, anyway, so Clark accessed his ship, finds out that there was another ship, there were two other ships on Earth that had crashed. He found Kara's.
Whoa! There's two
Yeah,
others?
I'll get to that. There's Kara's.
I'm so into this right now. I'm like, dude, I can totally picture that scene. That's so cool where he turns on the rocket and scanners are telling him that there's two other pods on the planet. Oh my god, that's got to be a killer story.
Yeah. So the one is Kara's at the bottom of the ocean. So he goes and he goes to that one first. It's the closest. Goes there and finds out that he's not alone. He has another survivor, and in fact it's his cousin, but she's young and she doesn't know where she is or anything, and anyway, or how to use her powers, and she's been under the ocean this whole time, so she hasn't been getting the sun, so she is weak at first, but starts to get her powers, and Clark ends up taking her to the second ship, which is actually is the Earth-27 version of the Fortress of Solitude. It's an old Kryptonian.
Oh, it's a big
it's
ship.
an old Kryptonian colony ship that had landed on Earth, and for whatever reason the colony had failed, but the ship was still there, still working, still had its robot servants.
Oh my goodness, dude, oh my gosh. Okay, I don't want this episode to turn into me wanting to brainstorm with you about all kinds of storylines. I think you're doing a good job of letting our listeners know what they need to check out. Because see, again, you can see how you've thought at all of these pieces and put these pieces together, and what if X then Y, right? If I'm gonna decide not to have time travel and multiple Earths, let's look at all the characters in the DC universe that could seriously affect.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it basically, inadvertently removes a huge part of the Flash's comic book powers because he vibrates at different frequencies and goes to different dimensions and travels through time and all of those things in the comics quite a bit. So trying to dig into that and knowing that you've addressed these things makes you a reliable narrator for the reader and helps to inspire their brain to go in different places, like mine is right now.
I'm glad to hear that. But just to finish with Supergirl, just so that we don't leave that unfinished, she becomes Supergirl when she learns to use her powers, and I really played up that she's the daughter of two scientists, Zor-El and his wife Allura, I think it was her name, and so I really played up that, and she's from an advanced alien society, and even though she's a teenager, I really wanted her to have that, for her to be smart. So she is kind of a technophile. She's really good at computers.
That's great, and that also echoes to the really cool version of Supergirl from the Justice League animated series too, because they really did a good job of playing up the fact that it's not her superpowers that makes her different in that show. It's the cultural uncomfortableness she has because she grew up mostly on another planet.
Yeah.
I try not to get too negative on our show because I just love all things DC and comics, and I want to support those. It's one of the things that disappoints me the most about the Supergirl TV show is that somehow she seems to be like a Clark wannabe personality type, even though she was never raised like on a farm and never raised with this naivete and made a choice to see her home planet die. Like, she made that choice in that first scene of the first episode, which I think was a really strong moment for her character, but doesn't really deal with any of that until a few nods later in the season. And I think that's such a cornerstone way to make her different than Clark that I think was unfortunately not explored. Because she's not Clark. And
No.
she's in no way Clark.
No.
And so playing on that is important.
For sure. 100% agree with you.
Clearly you agree with me that you created an entire universe in which that was true.
Yeah. But so she ends up becoming Supergirl. She's actually a member of the Earth-27 Teen Titans for a bit.
Nice.
And she's actually on the Teen Titans because I have one other thing with Earth-27 is I have a living timeline. And what that is, I say Batman was born in this year. This year he became he was born in 1972. In 1980 his parents died. 1998 he becomes Batman. So I have this all plotted out, the histories of these characters. Right. And just the way the timeline falls, she's on the Titans with Jason Todd's Robin. And when Jason Todd dies, it has an effect on those Titans. They were all his friends. And a lot of them...
nice.
Supergirl was one. She ends up quitting superheroing for a while. She goes to college and just tries to live a normal life. She actually ends up getting married.
Oh, wow. Okay.
This is a really old character that I have also revamped for Earth-27. Bronco Bill Starr.
Oh, my God.
Or,
wow.
Some comic people might know him as a Comet.
Yep.
In Earth-27, he's not a horse. He is a...
right.
I had him as a rodeo star, and she grew up on a farm, so she's kind of into the country stuff. or she spent her last few years on a farm.
Yeah. Which is understandable, but you don't ignore the fact that she grew up mostly on a planet with high tech.
Yeah.
You know, like to merge those two character concepts together really makes her a rich and interesting character.
Yeah. And so she marries this rodeo star that turns into this country singer. They have a short marriage that ultimately ends up failing because Clark actually doesn't trust this guy because he's a celebrity and stuff like that. Or he starts to become a celebrity, and he's like,
interesting.
You can't reveal your secret to him, And because she actually listens to Clark and she isn't 100% truthful to him, to her husband, the marriage ultimately fails. And Kara, or Karen is her civilian name, ends up blaming Clark for like the whole her marriage falling apart. And when she decides that she's going to get back into superheroing because it makes her, that was something that made her feel good about herself. She changes her name. She originally shows up in her old costume and stuff, and people was like, "Oh, look, it's Superman's cousin again," and she just says, "You know what? No, I'm not Supergirl anymore," and she becomes Power Girl. Rips the icon off her chest.
Rips the shield off.
And that's her little cleavage window. That's the canon reason.
So, again, for some people who may not be familiar with Power Girl, actually, if you've seen the Justice League animated series, they make a really interesting nod to Power Girl there
Galatea.
as well, which was in Galatea, the clone of Supergirl that you see in Justice League Unlimited in that first season. They have force grown her as a clone to be a little bit older than the Supergirl that's currently there, the actual Supergirl. And so it's basically Power Girl. They never refer to her that way. In fact, I still haven't figured out where they got this Galatea name. Are you familiar with that? Because I've looked it up a few times, and I don't know if it's just something they made up for the show. It doesn't seem to be a nod to anything.
I think Galatea is the name of the sculpture that comes to life in the play Pygmalion.
Oh my gosh, you're right. Oh man, that never occurred to me. Oh, interesting. Anyway, sorry, that was a bit of an aside, but one of the shticks about Power Girl is the fact that she's drawn well endowed, and instead of having a shield on her chest, she actually has like a chest window that still to this day bugs me to no end. But anyway, aside from that, I appreciate that you kind of put in a reason why she has part of it there.
We downplayed it a little bit, and it's not a circle. It's shaped like the shield still, which
is really, from a storyline standpoint, is actually quite interesting. I think. I mean, if you're going to have a boob window, have a story behind it. You know what I mean? If you're gonna decide to have one, I guess. Well, that sounds super cool. I think that's a fantastic example of the kind of diving deeper into one character and seeing where that all plugs in. And the fact that you have this timeline set up too allows you to do this thing that I refer to in the show all the time, which is, like if you're going to introduce, say, Fate's helmet, then you need to figure out how the existence of Fate's helmet and the fact that they keep it in their library is going to affect characters like, Calder or whoever, right? Like you need to look and see if it's going to affect them and how it affects them and see if it can make your storyline richer. And it sounds like you've really plugged these characters in. So a couple more things I want to touch on before we go. So you have artwork that is done by the fantastic Phil Cho, but are you writing this up in a story Bible? Is there stuff people can read? Are there short stories? Are they just kind of like the back of those Marvel cards, kind of breakdowns of the characters and their histories? Like, how can people interact with this universe? Okay.
Well, I do have a couple notebooks now. They're just scribbled notes all over the place. But in addition to that, I have a couple series with the villains that we first did. The first series I did was when Earth-27 became a thing, I made the Arkham Files, which were just meant to look like, a manila folder opened up with some notes in it, some pictures of the villains, made to look like old photographs, or not necessarily old photographs, but just kind of, rinky-dinky photographs, and notes that were like made from like an intake interview of the inmate. It would say like what their medical history was, some analysis of their behavior and their psychoses, some security assessments, for the security staff of Arkham. So like, for Two-Face, it would talk about like how he has this obsession with duality and this obsession with fate, and how he becomes inconsolable if, he doesn't have if he's not allowed to have his quarter to make his choices. So like I have it written in there that he's allowed to have his Two-Face dollar. It's actually a silver dollar. And like his picture, half of his jumpsuit's kind of torn up. And talking about how, in order to make him manageable, this is what we have to do. This is why he's this way. And then the doctor that's writing these in story in the universe is me. I actually wrote myself into the universe as a doctor at Arkham.
So I'm actually looking at during our video call here. There's a picture of a guy with like a goatee and glasses. Is that supposed to be you?
Yeah. My picture on Hangouts. Yeah. That's my.
Your icon, your icon, exactly. You're standing. Are you really 6 foot? Like
I'm
5?
6'5". Yeah.
Oh my god! He's standing next to a classic kind of mugshot scale, and he's definitely looks like about 6'5" there. Wow, holy cow! It's probably got to be helpful to be that tall when you're a corrections officer, I suppose.
Yes, it helps. And Phil, my artist. He's the intake photographer because he does the picture. So we have him drawn as a Arkham guard,
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Can I be a podcast show host in Earth-27?
Hey, sure. We actually did.
I would love that.
Phil does a podcast, and he has a co-host, and we did his co-host as an Arkham guard.
Oh, nice. Absolutely. And if I could, I don't know, be friends with Dick Grayson, that would pretty much make my world, I have to say. It would, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Actually, I want to mention that too. We're going to definitely have Phil on the show too. I've already been chatting with him, and he has a fantastic podcast called The Filter Show, and I'll talk about that in a little bit as well. So, but one of the things too, sorry, not to interrupt you, but you do have a GoFundMe page, which we mentioned. That was the other thing I wanted to talk about. But you just hit a goal at the time of this recording to get the Young Justice team put together, yeah?
Yes.
And so how does your Young Justice team, how does it echo the DC Comics Young Justice versus the animated series Young Justice, that kind of thing? How does that parallel?
All right. So for Young Justice, timeline of Earth-27, I mentioned the death of Jason Todd. That was actually kind of a big central thing for Earth-27. A lot of things branch out from the death of Jason Todd. And that's echoes to my own preference of, I felt like when Jason Todd died, it was at times it was irreverently handled. Like some writers would write Batman as being deeply affected by it, while others would just ignore the fact that he ever had Jason Todd, or he treated it kind of lightly. And so anyway, I have Jason Todd's death happening in 2006, and in the aftermath of that, the Justice League disbands, and the Titans kind of fall apart.
The Titans and the League both?
Yes.
Disband?
Yeah. And the reason for it is Jason Todd in Earth-27, his death is it's broadcast on the internet. The Joker actually sets up a poll for people to vote whether he lives or dies. Sort of a meta reference to Jason's death.
Oh, no.
And...
Oh, dude. Oh God, that's hitting way too close to home for me because I was one of those people that voted for Jason to die.
Well,
I shelled out my 50 cents for that back in the day, and now in Earth-27, I've become a terrible human being involved in a Joker snuff film. Oh, that's awful. It's awful in a great way.
But
okay, go ahead. Keep going.
And 5 days after the broadcast, Jason's body is tied up on the bat signal. And that's how Batman finds it. And, I mean, he's unmasked and everything, so his identity as Jason Todd, Bruce Wayne's son, is exposed. And Bruce has to kind of play damage control with this. He distances himself from Batman, from his other identity. He holds press conferences, and he says that he didn't know about this, and that he just publicly denounces Batman, and then by an extension, the League, the Justice League, and he actually has to kind of go on the defense and sort of throw some sideways players at the Justice League and in the press, and as a result, there's a public outcry, and the Justice League just disbands, and everybody just kind of goes back to their own cities. I mean, they still go on and fight crime as needed, but the Justice League at the time was government sponsored, so the government shuts them down. And Bruce Wayne falls into a dark place. Batman is really dark for about a year. The events of No Man's Land, which is a piece in or story arc in the comics, in the Batman comics, where Gotham is hit by an earthquake, and I also tie in the events of Nightfall when Bane breaks Batman's back. That all happens pretty much a year after Jason's death, and so Gotham is in ruins, and there's no Batman there to help him. Anyway, so Dick ends up becoming a Batman temporarily, and Tim Drake, he was training to be Robin at about that time, and then that's when he actually debuts as Robin. And meanwhile, while they're doing all that stuff in Gotham, Cyborg was a member of the Titans and a member of the Justice League at that time. It just barely started working for the Justice League. And it gets shut down, and he's like, I still need to do something. That there's crime and there's problems out there that we're not tackling. We need somebody to work on the global threats, and
absolutely.
So anyway, he goes to the old Justice League secret sanctuary in Happy Harbor, and I have him starting Young Justice in a roundabout way. He gets a hold of some other heroes that also want to help. He gets a hold of Calder, who was Aquaman's apprentice at the time, and he's like, yeah, I want to do something. And Cassie Sandsmark, Wonder Girl from season 2 of Young Justice, and Walt. And I have those three as basically enacting the first episode of Young Justice. Yep, where they go
of the TV series.
Yep, and they find Superboy, and so that's how that starts. And then they get Superboy, and he's still got some programming from Cadmus, so they like telepath on the team to kind of keep him in check. So they get Miss Martian.
Interesting. Oh, so she's like kind of constantly not just a one shot cleaning his mind of programming. Like she has to kind of be there present with him sometimes to
kind of act like his handler and just to keep his mind in check until they can get all that Cadmus programming out of him, because Cadmus was building him to be a weapon to destroy and then replace Superman.
Yeah.
And so he still has these violent urges and stuff like that. And then ultimately when Gotham gets
Are there any other I was just going to ask if there were any other like characters from the show that kind of come into your Earth 27. So you have Tim Drake, Robin.
Yes. When Gotham's back together, Tim Drake shows up.
All right, go ahead. This is the downside of not having video. Go for it. I'm going to let you talk and quit interrupting you.
Yeah. When Gotham gets cleaned up, Tim Drake joins, and he's actually, for the first few episodes of Young Justice, I thought that their Robin was Tim Drake, and I know you talked about this in your Secret Origins Robin video or podcast. And like there was, he's a computer expert, so I thought, oh, that's got to be Tim, and he's not wearing the pixie shorts or the pixie boots and the shorts, so. But so my Robin in Young Justice is Tim Drake. Nightwing still shows up. He's a best friend of Cyborg from their time in the Titans. They were in the first crew of the Titans. And so I have Nightwing shows up a lot to kind of mentor the team and kind of serve as their team leader every now and again, when Cyborg's unavailable. And then I got like Cassandra Kane's Batgirl, who's a Batgirl from the 90s.
Ooh. Yeah, Cassandra Cain. We talked about her a little bit. When did I was just talking to somebody and now I can't. Pranks Paul came on the show. We were talking about it. And for those of you who don't know who Cassandra Cain is, she was the Batgirl for a while, but she, like Damian Wayne, Bruce's son, she was also raised and trained by the League of Shadows. And so she is a particularly brutal melee combatant. Mm-hmm. And you have Stephanie Brown on the team as well?
Yeah, Stephanie joins when she starts becoming part of that family. She first joins Young Justice as Robin, and Tim disappears for a while. He goes undercover to help take down the League of Assassins or to investigate them. So he goes on. That's how I excused him for a while, and then Stephanie stepped into Robin, and then when Tim came back, she offered him back, the spot of being Robin. He said no and became Red Robin. And then I had Stephanie stay Robin.
Okay, I got you.
In the comics, she's very quickly, her time as Robin is very short. But I extended
very short.
I extended it a little bit. And then when Damian comes into the picture, she becomes Batgirl and Damian is Robin. Oh, yeah, she becomes Black Bat.
Oh, right.
Gotcha. Which was something that she was before the New 52 relaunch, and now she's called Orphan.
Okay, gotcha.
Other characters I have in my version of Young Justice. I should mention that when the Justice League came back, this program that Cyborg started became officially sanctioned, but actually it became a covert extension of Justice League, of the new Justice League. And it really has no name.
Which I love
about it. It officially has no name because it does not exist.
Yeah.
They usually just call themselves the team, but the characters of Justice League refer to them as Young Justice, and then they constantly are like, no, we're just the team. We're not called anything. And
I love that. That's great.
A couple other characters I have in my version. I have I know I'm going to forget some, but I have right. I have Ryan Choi's The Atom.
Okay.
So
nice.
The second Atom, although in Earth-27, I gave him a new name so that there weren't just two Atoms because Ray Palmer's still around. So he's called Micro.
Oh, okay, cool.
And then I have Giganta as a superhero or a superheroine instead of a villain.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Interesting. Okay.
She's
Is she on the Young Justice team as well?
Yes, I tied her origin into Ryan Choi's in that they were both associates of Ray Palmer, and at one point his equipment failed and he got permanently shrunk, and so while they were trying to fix that, the bio belt exploded, and as a result, it gave Ray and Ryan the ability to shrink at will, but it gave Giganta the opposite, the ability to grow at will.
Ah, interesting. Okay, cool. And then I know you've kind of folded in some of the Runaways, right, from season 2 of Young Justice as well.
Yes, the Runaways from season 2. I have Ty Longshadow, Asami, and Eddie Dorado. I took those 3 and I put them into the Earth-27's version of the Royal Flush Gang with they are respectively King, Queen, and Jack. And then I have Ace from Justice League Unlimited, or Justice League, one of the two.
Oh,
or both.
Yeah. That Ace is good,
I have...
Well, a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Really, yeah.
I have her as Ace, and then I took a character from the comics and a Gotham Orphan for their 10, Colin Wilkes. He's a character that's like a friend of Damien's. He got Scarecrow injected him with venom as a little 10-year-old boy, and somehow his body reacted to it so that he can make himself grow at any time and just become this big Hulk. And the fans started calling them the Runaway Flush Gang. Anyway.
Nice. That's awesome. Oh my gosh. So I've only been able to touch on some of this. I mean, the extensive work you've done on this universe is so impressive. I am looking forward to looking at and reading more about all of these things. But we only have so much time, unfortunately, so we're going to have to wrap up some of our time here together. But I wanted to ask you, do you remember where you were when you heard about season 3?
Yes. A fan of mine, I uploaded one of my things to DeviantArt, one of my Earth-27 things, and they just said, "Did you hear the news about Young Justice?" And I thought he was just going to tell me the whole Netflix binge Young Justice thing, that had been going on 6 months before that. And I was just like, well, what news is he talking about? I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I looked it up, and I was like, oh, really? And I was like, is this? I even checked the date
real?
to make sure it wasn't April 1st again.
Right, exactly.
And I was like, oh my gosh. And I have a Facebook page for 27, and I posted the news there, and I'm like, and I'd been pressuring for months to get some sponsors so that I could make the full Young Justice crew for Earth-27. So I used that as a pitch. I'm like, it's coming back. We need to get the Young Justice characters, guys. Help me make this happen. And
nice.
And we ended up just recently. We ended up. I didn't get any sponsors for them. They were the most requested characters, but nobody would sponsor them for some reason. And then just recently, I make these stretch goals on the GoFundMe page, and we hit these milestones that I will, I'll commission characters out of my own pocket, and they can tell me which ones they want. Mm-hmm. And we just got the Young Justice, and actually today, at the time of this recording, anyway. They're probably out now by the time you release this, but Phil just gave me the civilian for Artemis. So it's happening.
Oh, very cool. Very nice. Very nice. Man, that's fantastic. So we talked about a lot of stuff just now, but is there anything that I missed or anything that you'd like to add at all?
Yeah, on the subject of how people can follow this universe, I did want to mention, I mentioned the Arkham Files, a companion to that as the Oracle Files. And in that...
Oh.
Yeah.
I love Oracle. I'm so glad that she's in your universe.
Oracle, for those who don't know, is Barbara Gordon. She gets paralyzed by the Joker and stops becoming Batgirl and does something different. And that actually I could have mentioned this when... we were talking about Power Girl, because I tied Power Girl into helping create Oracle in the wake of Jason Todd's death, because it was broadcast online. Barbara sees a need to for some superhero to have an online presence, to be a better hacker than the villains. Yeah. And she goes to Kara and says, "Can you make me a computer system with Kryptonian technology that can hack anything?"
Dude, you're blowing my mind right now. That is fantastic. Oh my God, I love that.
And Kara, who was really good friend with Jason and was devastated, was more than happy to help. And so Barbara Gordon finds a way to stop she can't be Batgirl anymore, but she can become something bigger despite her handicap. And she becomes Oracle. Yeah. And so what the Oracle files are is just, they're made to look like just Barbara looking at her computer. So I actually have like a computer screen as the frame around these pictures. And like I even have a Wayne Tech logo on the monitor, so it's like. And then it has the picture of the character. It has like their statistics on off to the side, their height, their weight, their real names, where they live, stuff like that. And on the bottom, I've put a narrative, and for every version of that character, there'll be a different one of these files. So, like Bruce Wayne will have he has his Bruce Wayne file that basically covers his before he was Batman story. He has his Batman that covers a certain period of time. He has a second Batman, which is a different look that covers a later period, and so forth.
We'll have links to everything too, I should mention, in the show notes here. Go if you're already on Facebook, you can check out the Earth-27 project on Facebook as well. There's the GoFundMe page. We'll have links to all of this as well. And then we'll get Phil on to talk about his art. But guys, just don't miss any of this. Don't miss it. It's so good.
One other thing on the Oracle files is something that the fans really this is probably where Earth-27 gets a lot of its popularity, is I have this little thing in the upper right-hand corner called the Vox box. And what that is, it's just like, if Oracle is looking at her, looking at these profiles about the character, the Vox box is like her workspace that she has to keep open and observe at all times. And what it is like it's her communications log with different characters. And so like you'll have the pictures of like say you're looking at Batman's Oracle file. There might be up in the Vox box, there might be a picture of Dick Grayson and Jim Gordon and Oracle, and then underneath that, in these color-coded lines of dialogue, you can kind of read that. It kind of looks like a chat window, but it's like her program, like transcribing the things that they're communicating. So it might start off with Dick talking about how he's icing his shoulder from fighting Blockbuster, and having just this little very nonchalant talk with Oracle, very candid. And then she's like, oh, hold on, I got a call coming in. She switches over to Jim Gordon, and he's, hey, Barbara, where you at? I just want to make sure that you're okay because, Scarecrow just called in a bomb threat. And she's like, oh, no, I'm fine, and just things like that.
Interesting.
It kind of explores the characters' personalities, and also sometimes it's comical, sometimes it's dramatic, sometimes it furthers the plot of Earth-27. Sometimes it gives you a little secret to read between the lines. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's fantastic. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show, Roy, and talking to us about everything having to do with Earth-27, and hopefully inspiring some of our listeners to do some of their own projects of a similar vein. Everyone has their own favorites, their own views, their own takes on things. And in sharing these characters out, we get to see and explore so many different versions of their mythologies. And I can't thank you enough. So we've talked about a few things, but where can people find you here on Earth Prime? Except you don't have an Earth Prime, do you, on Earth-27?
There is. It's just you can't access it.
Right. Wait, I just realized something. You have Earth-27, but you don't have multiple Earths?
Yes. And
wah, wah.
It's like, I have a reason for this. I haven't explored this reason. I've hinted at it, but there is a reason. There's just no access to time travel, and there's someone or something blocking access. They're isolated Earth-27.
Oh, interesting. Also, I meant to ask you, why 27?
Batman debuted in Detective Comics number 27.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. Well, that's a perfect spot to end. So where can people find you here on Earth Prime?
You can find me on Roycevich. That's ROYSOVITCH /deviantart.com. You can find me on Facebook.com/Earth-27project. And you can also find me, you can find Phil's art on his DeviantArt page, phil-cho.deviantart. And then the GoFundMe page, if you want to help bring some further characters into Earth-27, you can go to gofundme.com/Earth-27project.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Roy, and thanks to everyone for sharing some time with us. You can find us on Twitter at the YJ Files, on Facebook at www.facebook.com/crashingthemode, and on our website, www.crashingthemode.com. If you love DC Comics like I do, please link over, if this episode hasn't inspired you to do so already, please link over to the Earth-27 Facebook page, their DeviantArt page, and more to check out this huge universe Roy and Phil have created. It is nothing short of inspirational. If you enjoy our show, please consider sharing it with a friend. You can find us at Whelmed, the Young Justice Files on iTunes or your podcatcher of choice. Please leave us a 5-star rating. The ratings really help others find the show. If you do leave us a rating or a review, please let us know, especially if you're outside the US. We have to look a little harder to find those. And even though Season 3 has been officially announced, please continue to spread the word to friends and family about this amazing series. Hashtag keep binging YJ on Netflix, pick up the comics, get yourself up to speed for the Season 3 premiere. And as always,
stay whelmed, everyone.
You've been listening to Whelmed, the Young Justice Files podcast. Our hosts are Rich Howard and Emily Booza. Our editor and producer is Neil Powell. Our theme was composed by Emily Mio. Our logo was created by Kevin Bates. Whelmed is a fan-made podcast and is not officially affiliated with DC Comics, DC Entertainment, Warner Brothers Animation, and any other owners of Young Justice or its related source material. As such, these companies have sole ownership of all symbols, images, names, logos, and proprietary material related to Young Justice. Original content of this podcast is ours under Creative Commons. Thanks for listening, and stay whelmed.